Indraprastha. Following the great conflict in the Kuru dynasty, tensions were high between the Pandavas and their cousins, the Kauravas. The kingdom of Hastinapura was the epicenter of these disputes, and King Dhritarashtra, the blind monarch and father of the Kauravas, struggled to maintain peace between his sons and the Pandavas. In an attempt to prevent a full-scale war, Bhishma, the venerable grandsire of the Kuru clan, and Vidura, the wise and loyal advisor, proposed a division of the kingdom. Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava and a man of integrity, agreed to the terms of the partition to avoid further bloodshed. He valued peace and believed in the greater good for the people of their land. Dhritarashtra, to placate the feuding factions, offered the Pandavas a barren stretch of land called Khandavaprastha, a dense, untamed forest filled with wild animals and spirits unknown to civilization. Though it seemed like an inhospitable land, Pandavas accepted the offer, seeing it as an opportunity to build a new legacy. But they had lost their position in the kingdom and needed to reinforce their glory by building something grand to rival Hastinapur. Few days later, the Pandavas, along with Krishna, stood at the edge of a dense forest, chosen as the site for their grand city, Indraprastha. The forest was teeming with life, ancient trees that reached the sky, animals that roamed freely, and mystical beings who had called this place home for eons. Krishna, observing the land, turned to his brothers and commanded,
"Burn it down, this is where Indraprastha shall rise."
Yudhishthira, the eldest, looked troubled.
Krishna, this forest is sacred. It is home to many creatures and spirits unknown to our kind. Must we destroy it for our city?
Bhima, always quick to action, nodded in agreement, but added,
This is the domain of Aranyani, the goddess of the forest. The creatures here have no place in our cities. But still, isn't there another way?
Arjuna, skilled in war and wisdom, spoke next.
I understand the need for a city, but this feels wrong. Must progress always come at the cost of nature? What of the animals, the spirits? What about their home?
Krishna, unflinching, replied,
Any development comes with a cost. To create something great, sacrifices must be made. Do not let sentiment sway you from the task. Focus on the city, not the loss.
Reluctantly, the brothers agreed, though a sense of unease hung in the air. A fire was lit, and the great forest that once thrived with sacred life was reduced to ashes, clearing the way for Indraprastha's magnificent rise. Forgotten cost. Indraprastha was built with grandeur and wonders that awed everyone who saw it. Illusions played tricks on the mind, and palaces shimmered as if touched by magic. Indraprastha, the magnificent city built by the Pandavas, is described in the Mahabharata as a marvel of architecture and design, reflecting the splendor of their rule and the divine blessings that aided its construction. Here are some of the various wonders of Indraprastha, as described in the epic Maya Sabha. One of the most famous wonders of Indraprastha was the grand palace known as Maya Sabha. This palace was not only a marvel of construction, but also a masterwork of illusions that could bewilder even the sharpest minds. Much like theme parks of today, the palace was designed with intricate illusions that played tricks on the senses. Water appeared as solid ground, and solid ground seemed like water. The grandeur of the Maya Sabha, the majestic palace designed by the architect Maya for the Pandavas, was a marvel of ancient illusion and architectural ingenuity. The palace, described in the Sabha Parva of the Mahabharata, featured intricate illusion that played tricks on the senses. Visitors often found themselves bewildered as solid ground appeared as water and water seemed like solid ground. The polished surfaces and mirrors used in its construction created a disorienting effect, causing people to stumble into pools or collide with invisible walls. This use of reflective surfaces in the Maya Sabha reflects an advanced understanding of optics that parallels other ancient civilizations' achievements. Archaeological finds from ancient India reveal that polished metal mirrors were in use as early as 500 BCE. The Mahabharata, with its epic descriptions dating from approximately the 3rd century BCE to the 3rd century CE, offers a glimpse into the sophisticated techniques employed to create visual illusions and reflective effects in ancient Indian architecture. Meanwhile, glassmaking, which began in the Middle East around 2500 BCE, was known to ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilizations. Egyptian artisans were crafting glass objects by 1500 BCE, producing beads and small items with techniques like core forming and casting. Mesopotamians also developed glass-making techniques, creating artifacts that were in use by 1000 BCE. The Romans later inherited and refined these methods, using glass in windows and mirrors by the 1st century CE. Their advancements, including the use of polished glass surfaces for mirrors, represent a significant evolution in the technology of reflective materials. The Maya Sabha featured endless corridors and mirrored halls that created the illusion of infinite space. It symbolized the boundless ambitions of the Pandavas and the vastness of their vision. The reflective surfaces multiplied the light, creating a dazzling display that awed every visitor. Gardens of Indraprastha. Indraprastha was adorned with lush, meticulously landscaped gardens that were a stark contrast to the barren land of Khandavaprastha from which the city had risen. These gardens were filled with exotic flowers, fruit-bearing trees, and rare herbs that were not only a feast for the eyes, but also served medicinal purposes. The sacred lotus pools. The city boasted several lotus pools with crystal-clear waters. These ponds were home to swans, cranes, and other waterfowl, creating a serene environment that symbolized peace and prosperity. The lotus, a sacred flower in Hinduism, represented purity and divine beauty, echoing the sanctity of the city. The hanging gardens, elevated gardens with flowering vines cascading from terraces, added to the splendor of the city. These gardens were filled with sweet fragrances and colorful blooms, providing a place of solace and reflection for the Pandavas and their guests. The Great Assembly Hall. The Great Assembly Hall of Indraprastha was another architectural wonder where the Pandavas held court, discussed state matters, and entertained dignitaries from across the world. This hall was vast, with towering pillars inlaid with precious stones and gold, ornate decor and precious materials. The hall's floors were inlaid with gems, and the walls were adorned with carvings depicting scenes from mythology and the history of the Pandavas. The ceilings were high and intricately designed, with chandeliers that illuminated the hall, making it look as though it was bathed in sunlight at all times. Thrones of the Pandavas. At the far end of the hall stood the thrones of the Pandavas, each uniquely designed to reflect the personality of its occupant. Yudhishthira's throne was made of ivory and gold, symbolizing his purity and fairness. Arjuna's was adorned with motifs of his conquests, while Bhima's throne was massive, reflecting his strength. The fortifications and gates. Indraprastha was well protected by strong fortifications, tall walls and grand gates that showcased the strategic acumen of the Pandavas. Mighty walls and watchtowers. The city was surrounded by walls that were not just protective barriers but also works of art. They were carved with scenes of battle and triumph, serving as a reminder of the strength and resilience of the Pandavas. Watchtowers were strategically placed, offering a vantage point to keep a vigilant eye on the surrounding areas. The grand gates. The gates of Indraprastha were elaborately decorated with carvings of celestial beings and guarded by warriors of great valor. Each gate was designed to awe anyone who entered, serving as a testament to the grandeur and security of the city. The river Yamuna and water management. Indraprastha was situated near the banks of the sacred Yamuna River, and the Pandavas made the most of this proximity by developing an advanced water management system. Canals and waterways. A network of canals and waterways was constructed to channel water throughout the city, ensuring a constant supply for drinking, agriculture, and sanitation. This system not only showcased the Pandavas' foresight in urban planning, but also contributed to the city's prosperity. Fountains and aqueducts. The city featured numerous fountains and aqueducts that not only serve functional purposes, but also enhance the beauty of the surroundings. The sound of flowing water added a calming ambience, making Indraprastha a place of tranquility. Temples and shrines. Indraprastha was also home to many temples and shrines dedicated to various deities, reflecting the Pandavas' devotion and reverence for the divine. The Temple of Krishna. A grand temple dedicated to Krishna, their friend, guide, and deity, was one of the most visited places in the city. The temple was adorned with statues, murals, and reliefs, depicting the various avatars of Vishnu and the life of Krishna, celebrating his role in guiding the Pandavas. Shrines of the elements. There were also shrines dedicated to the elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether, emphasizing the Pandavas' connection to the natural world and their respect for the forces that governed it. Yet, beneath its splendor lay the charred remains of a once thriving ecosystem. One day, as the Pandavas walked through their glorious city, Nakula paused. "Do you hear that, brothers?" he asked.
Hear what?
Yudhishthira inquired.
The silent noise, Nakula said, his voice heavy. The songs of the birds, the rustling of the leaves. They're all gone. It is replaced by a silent noise that hurts the head.
Yudhishthira mused.
We built this city to prove our might, to establish our place in the world. But that noise, yes, you are right, Nakula, that deadly defining silent noise, where does it come from?
Nakula replied,
I think they are emanate from the pit that Krishna asked us to dig, something like a well that goes down forever, the place where we commissioned a fusion reactor for our power needs controlled by artificial intelligence to keep the chaos inside. The interference creates a jarring noise in the quantum field, Yudhishthira, but it's necessary to keep the lights on at night. The desire to mold the environment around us has led us to a new problem.
One day the brothers met to discuss the increasing rate of suicides amongst the peasants, some of them even taking the decisions to end the life of the entire family. The 5 brothers were deeply concerned as how the kingdom's economics were being unfair to the people who held the very power to sustain it. Arjuna, who was a warrior with a heart of gold, was deeply moved by the choice that individuals were making for themselves and their loved ones. Was it justified that one may choose to end the choice of choosing, or let the universe choose whether they should exist or not? Why was there such a dystopian reality that emerged from a utopia that they set out to create? As they reached the Sabha discussing amongst themselves, they reached the courtroom where Krishna was already present to take care of the day's duties. Yudhishthira remarked cheerfully,
There you are. What a pleasure to see you up so early to attend to stately affairs. You are an inspiration.
Krishna,
Well, when you get to do what you really love, you find energy from within.
Arjuns,
Krishna, I have a question. I am deeply concerned at the farmer's plight. We had taxed the landlords of the kingdom to build this great city, which is the pride of the entire humankind. But there is a sad fallout, where the landlords have passed the burden on to the peasants. Under the burden of debt they owe to their masters, they have sadly started to end their lives in great numbers, sometimes killing their entire families. Is it fair that someone decides on a life that's so sacred and a gift from Shiva?
Krishna,
It's ignorance, Arjuna. Consider the landlords who set fire to their own buildings to collect insurance, sometimes with families still inside. The greed and disregard for life reflect the same systemic neglect that affects those who truly sustain us. Farmers, craftsmen, those whose knowledge and connection to the land have been honed over generations, are pushed aside by progress over preservation.
Yudhishthira, reflecting on this, said,
These are the people who feed us, clothe us, sustain us, yet they are the first to suffer when things go astray from the truth. Their natural wisdom to sustain life and harness nature's resources with care is discarded, their struggles ignored. And when they falter, we turn a blind eye.
Krishna nodded.
Indeed, farmers and craftsmen have an intimate relationship with their surroundings. They know their land, their tools, their trade. Their solutions, born from generations of experience, often surpass what any external help can provide. But when the policies fail them, when the market turns against them, they are left in despair, feeling hopeless and abandoned.
Arjuna, usually the pragmatist, added,
The economic pressures, the debts, the failing crops, the market manipulations, they push these people to their limits. Some see no way out but the most tragic ends, driven to harm themselves or their families, trapped in a cycle that seems unbreakable.
Krishna, with his characteristic insight, proposed,
Civilization must learn to respect those who sustain it. Rather than exploit, we must elevate these communities. Imagine if the same effort put into building great cities was directed toward empowering the farmers and craftsmen who are the backbone of society.
Yudhishthira asked,
But how do we achieve this, Krishna? How do we build without destroying progress, without exploitation?
Krishna smiled.
By balancing development with compassion, support must be rooted in understanding, not just charity. Policy should uplift rather than undermine. Community-centric programs, fair trade, and respect for traditional knowledge can provide the foundation for sustainable growth. Economic measures like debt relief, equitable pricing for produce, and investment in local infrastructure can free them from the debt trap.
He continued,
Encouraging cooperative efforts, where farmers can share resources and knowledge, will empower them. Philanthropy should not just be a gesture, but a systemic integration into how we build our societies. The true measure of progress is not the greatness of our cities, but the well-being of all who make them possible.
The Pandavas stood, looking out over Indraprastha, a city born from sacrifice. The grand vision they had pursued came with a cost they could no longer ignore. They resolved to ensure that the wealth and power they had gained would not blind them to the needs of those who had paid the price for their achievements. Krishna's words lingered, a reminder that true mastery lies not in conquering the world, but in harmonizing with it. The quest for greatness should never eclipse the need for compassion, and progress should always honor the roots from which it grows. In this realization, the Pandavas found a new purpose, not just to rule, but to steward a balance between human aspiration and the sacredness of the world that sustains them. During the later events of the Mahabharata, particularly in the Vanaparva, Book of the Forest, the city of Indraprastha is destroyed in a plot orchestrated by Duryodhana, the Kaurava prince. This plan involved the construction of a palace called the Lakshagraha, House of Lac, which was made of highly flammable materials. Duryodhana, envious of the Pandavas and eager to eliminate them, invited them to the palace. He had secretly arranged for it to be set on fire while the Pandavas were inside. The Pandavas managed to escape the fire, but the incident marked a turning point in their lives, leading to their exile and further challenges. The actual destruction of Indraprastha as a city by fire is not described in the text, but the plot against the Pandavas and the burning of the Lakshagraha are key events in the story.